Welcome to the video. My name is Matt. I'm a compulsive gambler in recovery, and I like to think of myself as your mind and movement mentor here to help you. Special guest today, talking to a friend of mine, Nick, aka Gambling Guard on TikTok, and fellow compulsive gambler. Welcome, Nick.
How you doing, Matt? You good?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for asking, mate. How are you?
Yeah, well, mate. It's the TikTok channel is dormant. Before you disappoint anybody, but yeah, there's still plenty of content on there which may help people. So
Yeah, nice. I remember we met a few years back at a gambling recovery group, which was very, very valuable for me actually at a certain time in my life, called Now We Win, arranged by a friend of ours. And I wanted to kind of chat to you. I'm trying to raise awareness about gambling addiction through this channel. Everywhere I look, the trajectory just seems to be so alarmingly worse. And I just can't think of any negative of people telling their stories that have struggled with this. So if you don't mind maybe giving us a summary of what age you were and kind of how you discovered gambling and maybe plant a few seeds, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm 39. And yeah, I've been in recovery since 2019 December, but 2020 when I cam stopped. But last bit was 20th of December 2019, and yeah, I've been gambling for my whole adult life until then, and the figures were stark, So when I finally did it, I did a subject access request, which gave you all the information. And it was £447,000 lost, and it was over 15,000 bets. So it's 3 bets a day, every day for 12 years, which is actually for me more of a mind-blowing stat than the almost 500,000 over 15 years, because it just the consistency and just the relentlessness, right? 3 bets a day, every day for 12 years. I mean, I was, in terms of sports online gambling, probably as deep into it as it's possible to be.
Wow, yeah, when you say it like that, that's really, I mean, I have no idea of my stats, but that is a consistency and like a relentlessness that was obviously carried you for a large chunk of your life. Can you remember your first bet?
Yeah, definitely, and it won. I mean, which is seen studies which suggest that's part of the problem, right? Because obviously I was 18, and it's when the frontal cortex hasn't developed and your neural pathways are forming. I placed a £10 bet in a shop actually, which was pretty much the one and only shop bet I ever did. And it was Middlesbrough and Arsenal in the Carling Cup 2003, and it was a semi-final. And I support Spurs. And Arsenal would play Middlesbrough. The guy I went to sixth form with was an Arsenal fan. We had just turned 18, so we walked into town to place our first bet. He bet on Arsenal because he supported them. I bet on Middlesbrough for laugh, put a tenner down at £140. So talking very small stakes, but for me it was like, fucking hell. I was a student. It's the easiest money I would ever have earned at the time. And it just spiraled and spiraled from there. I discovered online, I set up online accounts. I remember Euro 2004 was where it sort of accelerated, because there was football. I know subsequently there was football every day in various leagues, but that was the first time that football was on every single day, and I was betting every day. So I think it's like everyone has the first bet, and also you remember the first tournament you watched. That was the first tournament I bet on, so that was like a big landmark moment for me from 2004, and it just spiraled and spiraled from there.
Yes, I mean, the middles were what, three? That was 3-1 then, which is obviously quite long for a result. Yeah, I remember placing 20p in a roulette machine on number 23 red, because I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. £7.20, and then you just think, wow, let's go. This is like a gateway to money being made. You almost feel like you're privy to something that people don't
get.
So obviously give me like a snapshot into what you're thinking week to week, because I know for me there was very little bandwidth in my mind beyond gambling. I'd wake up in the morning, it's the first thing I think about. Massively football betting, sports betting as well.
Yeah, same.
I guess you just, at what point did you think that there was a problem versus you were just so caught up with it you were going to continue regardless?
Um, before I even begun to acknowledge there was a problem, you're talking years, years into the addiction. Certainly all through university, I was gambling, with no acknowledgement that there was a problem, even though there clearly was. Even starting employment, and then I started to earn money and started to earn quite good money. There was no problem in my mind because I could afford it. So the more I earned, the more I gambled. So no, I honestly, if you say 10 years, probably around late 20s, it was probably that long before there was even the slightest recognition of, this is a problem. But similar to you, 99% of my bets were on football. I was never one who would bet on Icelandic ice hockey or, Serbian basketball. Like, I knew the markets were there, but I didn't do that because in my head, if I'm honest, I almost viewed it as a bit of an apprenticeship because I think I know about football. I almost accepted the losses I had because I was like, I'm working out different systems and I'm trying different techniques and various kind of methods to get a profit consistently. And I almost accepted losing. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm trying that and I've done that module now, and now I'll move on to this course. And I was working my way through pretty much everything you could do, whether it was corners or time of first goal or away wins or whatever it was. And it almost became in my mind like an inevitability that I'd become a pro gambler. So it didn't seem like a problem at the time because in my mind it was going to be a feasible career. As ridiculous as it sounds, it was going to be a feasible career.
That what you said there is huge, I think, because I feel like there's a number of different ways that the addiction gets you. For me, it was never about money, but it made it about money. And another way that it gets you is I was exactly the same. I love my football. I could talk inside out 7 ways from Sunday about football. And it was a way to put my brain to use where like it was, oh, they're playing this formation, so there's going to be this number of corners. There's this, and I would almost enjoy the research aspect of it. So it was almost like other people aren't winning because they're not as committed as me. Like if I know like and in it and then you hear the stories of, and I'm sure there are a handful of them. I think around about 8% of people make a profit on Betfair each year. You hear the stories of the professional gambler, and then you kind of think, well, that could be me then. I could get in that. But then obviously I think we sound similar in the sense that for me, that was just never an option because I had these addictive tendencies where I just didn't know when to quit, couldn't control any sort of stake management or tilt in my emotions. So I'm assuming that that went south pretty quickly in a way that you would chase your losses or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, first of all, I relate completely. It was, I knew more, right? So I almost looked down upon if people who were going to the casino, I almost looked down on that as a form of gambling because I was like, you're idiots. It's like that is game to win. It's like you're going to lose. Whereas I'd convinced myself, it's like, yeah, but I do actually know more though. It's like, yeah, I know like everyone thinks that, but I actually do. As you say, I've put so many hours of research into this. I'm going to crack this. And that's not to say I didn't do all the casino stuff. Like I was fortunate enough through work to go on reward trips each year. and I went to Vegas over 10 times, right? So I
Wow.
was there pretty much every year. And I would gamble while I was there, but that was never my thing. That was never what really got my juices flowing. And it was always the sport stuff. And like you say, I'm also not anti-gambling, by the way. There are people who gamble and, okay, yeah, they can win and whatever. But I never had a hope in hell of that because I was an addict. And when I tell people the number, and it's right, it's like 447,000, 15 years, that makes people think it's like, how bad were you that you lost every? No. I won loads. Like I won all the time. Well, not all the time, but I won a lot of bets. But it didn't matter because any bet I would win, I was never satisfied with and would inevitably lose it. So people ask me that quite a lot. It's like, did you not get tired of losing? Well, you would have if you kept losing, but because you were winning regularly, there was always enough dopamine going on to just keep you going. So, one of your videos on TikTok the other day, it was like, you're always going to end up with nothing. There is not that kill switch in a gambling addict to stop. It's just an inevitability when you lose.
Yeah, all addiction, I think, is a race to the bottom. And yeah, gambling is, I spoke about this in another video, it's one of those ones where you can make a logical case for keeping it going. It's like if I've lost 8 bets in a row because I back the unders market for goals, Novas is looking good today on law of averages. I know that's gambler's fallacy, but that's just the way I would think. And often it would then be successful. But it was just my relationship with it was so toxic that there was no consolidation of winning and management and discipline strategy. It was just I'm playing just to play and want to constantly continue, and that's just unsustainable. Yeah, I think so. How long have you been in recovery now?
Well, so my last bit was 20th of December 2019.
Wow, okay, so
I,
5.5 years.
well, yeah, but then I registered with GameStop on the 2nd of January, and it's a funny story on this actually. So I thought and was telling everybody that I'd signed up for 5 years. So bear in mind, 20th of December 2019 was like the 2nd of January 2020 that I GameStopped, right? Now, I was telling everybody that I did 5 years, and I can only think looking back that was still, because I was obviously 10 days into recovery. I mean, it was still nowhere near anything. I can't consciously even remember doing it, but I'd clicked on 1 year, right? Now, it turns out it was 1 year, but I thought it was 5 years. So after 5 years, well, I could, yeah, this is the ridiculous thing. I could have been gambling. So come this January, I had a calendar reminder that just popped off. It was like reinstall GameStop, or not reinstall it, but do enough for 5 years. And then I was calling to them on the phone, and then we're going through stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, cool." And I was like, "How long do you want?" I was like, "Well, another 5 years." And they're like, "You
Never had 5 years.
No, you have to call them to remove it, right?"
Yeah.
So there would still be a call-off period and whatever. And they're like, "Yeah, we can extend it, but just so you know, you could have been gambling again since 2021." And that was quite a weird feeling, actually. Yeah.
It's something I think you're to be applauded for, because you do hear the stories of people going on the Moody websites that aren't on the GameStop, betting on, things in Malta and things like that are outside the regulations because they're just desperate to gamble. That's almost a bit of like a badge of honor to wear, that almost you were you were without blockers and still obviously set in your ways to not gamble.
Well, but bear in mind, I thought I had the block. But in my mind, it was it's 5 years, and I was just it was an easy thing because again, it was never. I was never in my mind going to be at risk of I'm going to walk down to a local casino, or that was never my thing. So knowing that it wasn't accessed, or in my mind, I didn't think it was accessible. But yeah, it was such a weird conversation. It was quite satisfying though, because
Yeah, definitely.
I could have accessed it far sooner than I did for sure. So yeah, it was.
Yeah. So the word rock bottom gets banded around in the addiction space. Obviously, 3 bets a day, 15 years, or a mean average of. Share as deeply or as not as you want to, but what was the point that, especially after that regularity, made you decide this isn't for me? How did that play out?
I mean, it'd been escalating, because you also, or for me, I mean, I know you said it wasn't about the money. That was a driver for me. It wasn't about the money psychologically, but in my mind, it was about the money. So I needed bigger and bigger wins to get the same jeopardy, same element of risk, and same excitement. So it was actually in the final year of gambling that was the worst ever by a significant amount. And I gambled away the house deposit. So we were quite close, with my partner at the time, quite close to buying a house. And we were, ready to put our offer in and somewhere we liked. And I gambled 10 grand away in a week. And that was part of the deposit that we needed for the house. So I had no choice then. And the weird thing about that is when you talk about rock bottom, that was nowhere near my rock bottom, because when I told someone for the first time, I was on cloud nine, mate. Like I felt like I'd put over a decade of lies and addiction, on somebody else essentially. So I was on cloud nine. Like I just was so I don't know. I felt so free almost that it was no longer. Yeah. Like it wasn't a secret. Like I finally told somebody, but it was nowhere near rock bottom, because obviously what I didn't realize was I just put on somebody else and couldn't understand why they were upset. Like, what are you worried about? I'm cool now, and I'm going to be recovered. And I would say probably it took me about 6-7 months to apply for the subject access request, because for me that number was important, and people have different opinions on that, but for me that was really important. I needed to know what I'd lost in total, because I only bet with two bookies weirdly as well. It was Betfair and Paddy Power. I was loyal to them. I was a very good customer for both of them, so they were dishing free bets to me and stuff. There was no reason for me to leave. So it was with those two. So if I wanted the exchange bets, I would go to Betfair. If I wanted accumulators, I would go to Paddy Power. Betfair was for the single, the back in and the lay in and all that stuff. And it wasn't, so I think it was July of 2020. And that relationship had ended, and I was then looking at the sort of the wreckage of it, and I thought, well, now's a pretty good time to pull the plaster and just find out what it was. I would say once I had that number, then for me rock bottom came, because then I had to then it was clear. It was like, well, think about the life you could have had, what that money could have got. And then for me, so it was almost like a delayed period of 6-7 months where I was, almost energized. I started doing social media stuff and was having counselling that GamCare had organised. I was really positive. And then when that hit, and then when I found out at the actual true scale of it, that was probably rock bottom for me.
So for those that don't know, the subject access request, I know you mentioned it at the start as well, is essentially contacting the gambling companies to get the figures of over X period of time. Please show me my activity. amounts, frequency, that kind of thing, and they send you a report.
Yeah, yeah. They sent me. It was a huge Excel file, which just went on and on and on and on. And you had to go through it. They didn't compartmentalize it for you. They didn't give the numbers to you. You had to work it out. But obviously, it's fairly easy to do on Excel. But I mean, it took a little bit of time. So you had to calculate, okay, that was the bets in, that was the bets out, this is the difference. Yeah. And I did that off both sides. So yeah, if you do it, they have to get back to you in 30 days. And they did, and they have to legally, but they complied with it. And yeah, it was, I remember where I was when I did it. It was like, got the email, got it through. I then waited another couple of days before I felt strong enough to do it. Just on the day I was feeling good. But it was, I can understand why people don't do it. And I've had this conversation with quite a lot of people. So I know you mentioned you haven't done it. No. I get that too. Yeah, I completely get. Some people don't want to know because it might make it worse, or it might, the guilt or whatever. But for me, in the long run, it was useful.
I think I use so many different operators that I don't really think it would have a degree of accuracy. I'm not against doing it, and I certainly admire your courage to do it. I think probably many people should. And I really get what you're saying, probably about the delayed effect of, because when you're in active addiction, you're in such a bubble that I guess it took some time to kind of simmer the emotions down and come out of that. And then when you're looking at cold hard numbers, you're thinking, gosh, that's so much money in the real world. That looks like X number of cars, X percentage of a house, and you actually think, oh yeah, like it wasn't consequence free, my actions. And going back to what you said about, I think a lot of the Gamblers Anonymous for partners and things, I think a lot of what they deal with is, as a gambler, you live a lie in your mind for so long, and there's so much deceit and half truth telling and that when you actually do tell someone, it is like, this is the best thing I've done in months. You just asked me where I was yesterday and I didn't lie. I actually told you where I was, versus like, or you asked me what I'm doing on my phone and I've actually just shown you, look, I'm just doing this. And it's kind of like, it's so nice and so like a weight's been lifted, but then all you've done essentially is just pass that to the partner, that or friend, relative, whoever, that was at nil, that's now at like overnight. And you're almost looking at them like, why aren't you happy with me? I'm telling you the truth for the first time in years. And they're just like, give me some time to process this.
Exactly that. Yeah. Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tricky. No, go
on. So I lost my train of thought now. Yeah, but no, I
difficult. Yeah, very, very difficult. So I've got to ask you, because there's this Jordan Peterson quote that I've been playing with recently, which is actually about alcohol, which is like, if your alcohol is really, really effing fun. So if you're gonna not do it, you need to find something that keeps you interested in not doing it. And I would substitute that exact quote for gambling. Gambling can be exhilarating, exciting. There's a small part of you, maybe not this week with internationals, but like as a big football fan, that probably at any moment doesn't seem, your past relationship with it aside, doesn't feel like something you wouldn't necessarily want to do, as something that would be enjoyable for you. 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, video printer goals coming in, games all going, brains on fire. What have you found something to substitute gambling, or have you taken a different mindset or a worldview? Please share about what's been helpful for you in that way.
Firstly, I agree with what you're saying in that is undeniable. Which is also another thing. Actually, there's so many good people in the space and the gambling recovery community, and and you're one of the guys. We met a few years back, but Darren Crocker. There's so many people that I won't. Darren Crocker, I just said, he's one I'm actually still in touch with.
Did you rule it
He had
out?
to rule it out.
Yeah, rule it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I know.
And I'm still in touch with him, but I mean, there's so many. The guy's epic. Were brilliant with me. But as I won't go into naming them all because I'll leave someone out, obviously. But a lot of them told me at the time, because I was self-anointed, if you like, as a recovered addict. That's what I would tell people. I was recovered, which I think helped me at the time because it gave it that finality and permanence. But now, if you ask me, I'm recovering, right? It is more of an acceptance that, like you say, yeah, it will always be there. I will always think about, even to this day, like I think what odds that will be. I wonder, no inclination to want to bet on it, but I still don't think I'll ever be able to switch that part off completely. And it's particularly when you see stuff. So you did a video the other day on your TikTok of you were talking about you would go for a workout on a Saturday morning, so your endorphins were up anyway, and you'd be buzzing because then you go back and your missus was away or whatever, and you'd have a full day of football to watch and the midday kick off, the 3 p.m. And I was like, yeah, 100%, 100%. So I think the recovered self-designation helped me at the time, but I guess partly maturity and just distance away from it. You do accept that it will always be recovering. It's a thing like you're never an alcoholic. And I think it is relevant. But yeah, they say recovery needs replacement, right? And, you do need something else to put your time into. I tried all sorts, mate. I was learning the guitar and started running, doing various things, which I threw myself into for a period of time. But none of them stuck, they were just that sort of initial vehicle, in which to do it. So I think in the early days, it does help to almost become a bit obsessive with something else. But I actually made a conscious decision not to suddenly become like a CrossFit addict or, whatever it is, because I don't think it's healthy to be addicted to anything. To be honest, I like to go to the gym, I like to stay healthy. There's a lot of stuff I like to do, but I don't think being addicted to anything is good. So I've seen it happen, where it could be something on the surface quite healthy that people do really throw themselves into. But over time, that can have equally, well, maybe not equally, but, that can have negative impacts on your relationships and your time and your priorities in the same way. Even if the activity itself is healthy. So I almost made a conscious decision not to fully go all in on something and just try and keep a bit more of a balance.
Yeah, I love that because, like you said, all addictions are inherently by definition bad, and you see people replace one thing with another. And am I an exercise addict? I suppose. I think there's probably worse things that I could be actively engaged in. The sense I get from you is you've got a great level of self-awareness, and I know someone interviewed Harry Kane recently, and I can't remember what they asked him, but one of his responses was, "In life, I just try not to get too high, and I try not to get too low." And I just feel like there's something really to be said for that. It doesn't have to be, I've got 50 bets on, my brain's going on fire Saturday afternoon. I could just be sat here with the dog. Tomorrow might just be like a Sunday. It might just be a normal working week. And call that maturity, call that, I don't know. But I think that's something that an addict sometimes needs to learn, because for me, it was like when I stopped, I was so turbocharged. It was like I can't imagine not being turbocharged. And if I'm not going to be in that direction, you've got to give me something else. And some of
Yeah.
that is my ADHD. That's another conversation. I don't really want to, I'm not even sure how I feel about the label for that. It's certainly a personality trait. But I think, yeah, I think you making a conscious effort to sit back and say, and actually going all in on the guitar is probably not super helpful versus I think is kind of cool. Do you get urges or triggers, or because for gambling for that long, you must have been dopamine run to an extent. You must have created some pathways that were just kind of the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So you've all probably unpacked or unpicked a lot of that over 5 years in recovery. But do you sense that in your world now at all?
Yeah, I do. It was the whole way I lived my life, right? So I worked in sales. I still work in sales, in recruitment, and it was literally my waking life was driven by dopamine. So sales is highs and lows, right? You have good days, bad days. You make a good sale, well, it's going to earn you a good chunk of money. You have bad days where the deal doesn't come in and you've lost a load of money. So it was sort of mimics gambling anyway. So I would have that day at work, and then good or bad, I would just continue that. So if I had a really good day at work and just say for argument's sake, I did a deal that was going to earn me £1,000 in commission, in my mind, right, I've got £1,000 to play with tonight. Perfect. So I would keep chasing that. I'd be like, I'm having a great day. Like, I just want to carry on. If I had a really shit day, it was like, well, let's turn this around. Like, let's finish the day on a high and let's win on the Champions League or whatever was on an evening. So it was just a constant cycle. I was a bit, I'd say fortunate, but I mean, I didn't know that in, late 2019. I didn't know what was coming with COVID, but looking back, the timing was quite fortunate because of COVID. It was you weren't living a normal life, so I had a long period of adjustment in recovery where I was just living on my own in a flat, wasn't allowed to see anybody. So you almost had to create a new routine and balance. And because there were less temptations in that period, you know, I don't think I would, because I've been a social drinker all my life anyway. Like, I've never drunk at home, for instance, in that sense. But I was never going to replace it with alcohol because I couldn't go to a pub, right? So there were a few things where the timing was quite fortunate and quite lucky. That by the time normal life resumed, sort of 18 months afterwards, because remember, from December 2019, by the time we turned around, March 2020, and we were in lockdown, right? So
Yeah.
I was on that initial high of recovery, straight into lockdown, different life completely. So by the time it was all, I can't remember when it was, May or June 21, around that time, when things were finally relaxed, I'd got into such good habits in my own sort of isolated world that it became easier. I think I would have found it harder, mate, if I was embracing it in the normal routine of life,
That's a
because there
great
wouldn't have
point.
been that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there was a lot wrong with the COVID lockdowns, but it sounds like the timing there serves a purpose. A lot of people reach out to me on the platforms and I'm struggling with this. How do I stop? Da, da, da. And I almost just want to round them up and be like, when you quit gambling, you are going to be in such an anhedonic headspace, which is just you cannot get a kick out of anything else the same way that you will gambling. You could go and start ballroom dancing, playing chess, volunteering at the dog shelter, going out in nature. It's not going to, you have got to ride that out. For some people, it's 3 weeks. For some people, it's 6 weeks. There is a finite time to it, though, when it will end. And there's a reason why, silly analogy, but like heroin addicts go into padded walled rooms. It's just to ride that period out, to just flush the brain chemicals out. And then you can start to see the wood from the trees a little bit. You've actually got some conscious control over your habits. You can actually think about a proactive routine where you're in charge, not like the addiction. So it sounds like you're almost like forced into that, which is a gift in many ways, as well as obviously a curse that you can't see your mates. There's a global pandemic.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was like it was the worst year of my life. But then with distance, when you look back, like I do acknowledge that was also really useful, because had I tried to recover ordinarily, I I would have struggled. I would have struggled, I think, and then possibly I would have replaced it with something else. Because also it's that phrase of abstinence isn't recovery. You might be able to be abstinent from whatever your poison is, gambling, addiction, whatever. But all addictions, they're all a sort of self-medication to some degree for some reason, in my
Yeah.
opinion. It's all like a trauma response, the way I view it. So abstinence is recovery, because even if you aren't doing the activity, unless you understand why you were doing it to begin with and you've really come to terms with that, you're never going to recover in the long term. You'll be abstinent for a period of time, but you won't be able to recover because you don't understand why you needed to do that in the first place, right?
Yeah, I completely agree that abstaining is fighting tooth and nail to not gamble. Recovery is proactive endeavors to surround yourself with the right peer group, get support, learn about the addiction, introspectively think about yourself. There's a proactivity to that rather than just going to try and wait out this weekend and not do it. I've done 2 days, I've done 3 days. This is probably a good area to wrap on, actually. Like, what do proactive things for your recovery now? Do you think of it week by week? Maybe there's some things you do subconsciously, but do you do anything as Nick, the compulsive gambler, each week?
I, I still consume, for lack of a better word. I still consume media and literature and podcasts and talks, which is why I came across your video, and I messaged you because we'd not spoken in 4 or 5 years, whatever, and the algorithm still feeds me the gambling recovery or addiction videos, and so
How
yeah,
clever
so
the
if
algorithm.
you, it knows you better than you know yourself, doesn't it? It's outrageous. But yeah, so I still consume it and seek it out and still read stuff and still watch stuff. And I'd encourage anybody to do that, because you can never have too much information on the subject. But beyond that, no, I don't, to be honest. It's been a good chunk of time, so I wouldn't say there are any sort of routines that I have in place now. But yeah, you can never like avoid it as a topic, in my opinion, because then it will just breed complete.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a bit of a personal question, but what you were telling about the sales really sort of made me think of this. What's your relationship with money like now? Because I can really get what you said about the closing the high value deals and the will they, won't they, and the writing your own paycheck. And there's maybe a variance to the average person that's just in a non sales role. And they say closing a sale is actually a really good form of natural dopamine. Obviously, a lot of gambling is so corrupted, cheap dump dopamine that we can't really handle it, and that there's a level of the effort that you've gone to get the sale over the line, whether it's your negotiation, your charisma, your planning, whatever that's done it, as opposed to largely gambling, it's out of your control. Do you have you just, because I like to sometimes buy clothes that are more expensive than what I should buy. and I noticed that's the compulsive cheap dopamine chaser in me. Or I'll look to go to one too many concerts in expensive seats or something like that I do. And I'm just wondering if you have anything like that, or you notice synergy in that world with the gambling world, or you're just more of a methodical budgeter
I mean, I paid way too much for Oasis tickets
now. Okay.
on the morning of the gig.
Oh, really? Wow, that must have been a
Well,
few.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't get the raffle,
Okay.
for me, I wanted to go to the first night. Right, it was all about the first night because then you would have seen all the videos and stuff. So I literally woke up on the morning of the Cardiff gig and then ordered one, which is amazing. I'm glad I did. So,
What
but
sort of
it's
bumps we
nice to be able
talking
to. Some bunch, yeah. It's 700 quid actually. Too much for one
How
ticket.
much,
I
sorry?
went on my 700, and I went on my own. Made,
Okay.
made friends with the people there, sat next to, had a great night. It was
Love
worth it.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I wouldn't say that it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would put 500 quid on Stoke to beat West Brom on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Right. But that the reason I did it on the morning of was because I was thinking about it for weeks. I'm like, it's one night. Like, is it worth it? So your association with money does completely change.
Mm.
And I think it probably does make you a little bit more frugal is probably the wrong word, but you learn, like, I didn't learn the value of money until I was 34 years old when I stopped gambling.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I would say just having an awareness and understanding what actually. There's a phrase I always would say to my brother. It was like in the early period of recovery, it's like, it's weird. Like, if the money isn't going anywhere, he'd be like, well, what do you mean? I'd be like, well, I'm just so used to my pay going in and it just quickly being whittled away within days or weeks of gambling. And it's just that thing of the money not going anywhere unless you spend it. It was just like an alien concept to me. And yeah, it just changes your relationship in context of how you live completely.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a different money story, but like that can massively intertwine into gambling addiction because, like you say, in some ways, what's 700 quid when the old you would have done that maybe on a championship fixture for something that is once in a lifetime? The biases are back together, first night, you work hard, play hard, you thought about it for months, so there's a level of lack of impulsion. But then at the same time, I sometimes feel, am I at risk of, well, I'm not gambling, so I'm going to buy that. I'm not gambling, so I'm going to buy that. I'm not going to, and then it's almost this juvenile, well, I can have everything I want then, like if I'm, which is just, yeah, maybe that's a subtle area of development for me, but I think it's, it's one of those ones where, yeah, maturity sort of comes through, and value, for what you said about learning the value of money, I think is massive because that's one thing that gambling will corrupt for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's been so great to talk to you, mate. Massive insight, and really, really appreciate it. Last question: how do you handle? Would you describe anything that you get on a day-to-day basis as an urge or a trigger? And if you did, how would you handle it? I know you're so far away from gambling now, so in some ways I almost want to ask you this question from 3 or 4 years ago when you were maybe not as deep into recovery. Is there anything you would share there?
I listen to Talk Sport a lot. My drive in the morning, I'll have Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoy. On my drive home, it will be Goldstein and Ben, which I recommend to anyone, by the way, that those two are gold.
Yeah, I like it.
There are a hell of a lot of gambling adverts on TalkSport, and if there is a big game coming up, or there's the Euros or a World Cup, or whatever, like there's a World Cup next year, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's like a trigger, but when it does come to a big game, and they are, they will have the sections on TalkSport about they get people on from William Hill or whatever to do like the
Yeah.
previews, and you do listen to them. And I don't have to turn it off, I can keep it listened, but they are talking about this team being 8-11 or whatever it is. And then I'm almost pricing it up in my mind as I'm driving. I'll be like, oh, it's like that. That seems short. That's a bit short. I would have had them higher than that. So, but I think that exposure is quite good, and I get all of the arguments about gambling advertising and, why it is so dangerous, essentially. And I think it is. But for me, I think it is how you view it in the prism you sort of absorb it. And if you're conscious of it, you just sort of check yourself. And as I'm driving, and it's like, oh, it's a bit short. But what the fuck are you talking about? Why are you pricing it up?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go as far as to say triggers, but they still have those conscious thought processes, which is why I said recovering rather than recovered, because I can't see after 5 years I will ever get. I just don't think I've got the brain to never have that level of awareness, right? So some people can listen to it and not even know what they're talking about or even care. I'm always going to have that context, which, if you use it well, can still be quite beneficial, actually.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that. You hear all the radio and it jumps into your conscious awareness. And I think I did a video on this the other day. For me, there is no me that can interject between me saying things like they're a bit short or that's interesting or I can't. The brain just is so conditioned from so many years that like here's 8-11 and thinks, okay, well that probably could be 4-7 at some places, might be evens elsewhere, that kind of thing. And it's just like, who is this person? It's unconscious. I am so conscious. I've said this 3 times now. This is the last question. If there
I'm
was
not in a
someone,
rush. You can
no,
ask
okay.
as much as you
No,
like.
I think this is a good one to end on. So if there is someone out there watching who is struggling, and I know there are copious amounts, it's very, very difficult because everyone's got their own story. And I think in some ways it's hard to give advice because people need to be at a point where they can hear it when a student is ready, a teacher and a peer kind of thing. But if you could give a minute summary of advice to someone who knows they're out of control or problematic relationship with gambling and is just in a bit of a frenzy, not sure of the next move, what would you say?
With no preparation, what would I say in 1 minute? You need 3 A's. So you need to deal with or address access, accountability, and acceptance, right? And you can do them in whatever order. Because some people think acceptance needs to come first. It doesn't, because that can be the hardest part. Access is, there are tools in place for access. GamStop being one. If your weakness, if you like, was online gambling, then GamStop has to be done. That would be the first port of call for anyone, which most people are, I think, right? It's mainly an online problem, particularly for young men. You need to get a GamStop, you need to sort your access. You have to address accountability. You can't beat addiction, certainly on your own. You need like a team of support around you, whether you're talking to them directly or indirectly. But one thing I did was share my bank details for complete transparency. So I knew I had the extra layer of accountability, so I couldn't lie because I knew I was being watched. That wasn't permanent. I wanted actually my adult independence back, but for a certain period of time, that really helped. And you do have to accept you're an addict. And I don't want to sound like Russell Brand with it, but you need to accept you're ill and it is an illness. And unless you accept it, you're never gonna be it. You don't have to feel ashamed about it. You don't have to, you have to learn from it and grow from it. Being able to beat yourself up about it. You don't have to feel guilty or ashamed. Addiction is an illness, and you have to accept you're ill before you can get better.
I love that. Great advice. 3 A's. I'm not sure I'd have got a better answer than that if I'd have given you a day's preparation. That was absolutely superb. Thank you.
You probably
Well,
would.
thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, mate.
No worries, mate.
Friday afternoon. Much appreciated. Good to see, and so glad that you're doing well. Flying into north of 5 years recovery now, which is absolutely huge. And I will catch up with you soon, I'm sure. And take it easy, mate. Chat soon.
Yeah. Hopefully,
Thanks a
all
lot,
the best.
mate.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
Bye.